Hi guys, this is Charlie from Altcoin Buzz making a new video. And as you probably know, we're in a consolidation time which is incredibly boring, but also, of course, incredibly healthy for the markets. And a good time to learn new things. So I thought that we would journey back till the beginning and talk about the name that started it all, Satoshi Nakamoto. The father of Bitcoin, the Gandalf of cryptocurrency, the Holy Mary of blockchain, the Moby Dick of tech reporters, and the Donald Trump of. Anyway, I will refer to this person or people as a he, but this is merely for simplicity reasons and because it's a man's name. This doesn't imply anything more than that. Now, I know that there are many of you guys out there who are very familiar with the history of Bitcoin, and the ones who don't want to listen to my voice any longer than necessary, you can skip a bit forward. But if you are new to this or just need a reminder, stay tuned. Okay, the history of Bitcoin. It's the beginning of November 2008 and the financial crisis is at its climax. The economy is at its lowest point for God knows how many years, and to say the least, there is a lot of anger and anxiety around the world. On a cryptography email list called metsdauder.com, someone publishes a paper called, quote, Bitcoin, a peer-to-peer electronic cash system, end quote. And the author is someone who's almost no one has heard of before. It's Satoshi Nakamoto. What he proposes is to create a network circulating around a public ledger. The ledger records every transaction that has ever been made, and in order to transfer money from one account to another, you have to announce it to everyone on the network. The underlying security is provided by cryptography and signing each transaction with a so-called private key that validates that you have access to your account and the amount you want to send. Great! You can now send an amount peer-to-peer securely on the network and no one can practically interfere with it due to the strength in the cryptography. However, one thing remains which is essential for economic system to be able to work correctly. This is known as the double spending problem. And what this means is that you cannot be able to send the same money twice. In this case, what would happen if two transactions from the same account were announced at exactly the same time? The classic solution would be to arrange an organization that governs their transactions and only includes the one who arrived first, or if they arrived at exactly the same time, a random one. But then we would be back to where we began. Third party, centralized, banks. We could just as well use the services we have right now. So let's look at it in another way. We probably couldn't do this without having someone regulating the double spending problem. But who says that this has to be the same entity every time? So what Satoshi proposed was to create a competition in being this regulator. Anyone all over the world would be able to compete, and the competition would be to solve a cryptographic puzzle. This puzzle is extremely hard to find, and it also gets harder the more contestants you have. The competition is called mining. But what this also means is that it takes a lot of processing power and electricity to drive the network and its transactions forward. So the question is now, why would anyone want to do this? And remember, we haven't even mentioned Bitcoin yet. We're still talking about an arbitrary entity, which could be a sort of electronic dollar. And in a centralized cash system, the middleman always takes some sort of fee. But we don't have that yet on our new system. We need an incentive for the miners. So what the paper proposes is to create an asset on the network that will be called Bitcoin, and anyone who solves the puzzle will be rewarded with a certain amount. So from the beginning, there are 0 Bitcoins on the network, but this amount will rise steadily as people are mining. So what we have now is a monetary system where as long as you contribute to keeping it safe, you will be rewarded. And this is actually enough incentive for the early miners. The Bitcoin is of course not yet worth anything, but this is what early adopters do. They see the potential and the vision for the future. And building the system in this way also keeps the network secure in other not so obvious matters. Let's say a miner tries to tamper with the transactions. Firstly, if they don't succeed with their scheme, they will have lost money that they have put into electricity. And secondly, if they actually would succeed and it would be noticed, it would probably lower the whole value of Bitcoin, and therefore they will have shot themselves in the foot. So this was Satoshi's way of solving the problem with double spending in theory, and as we are seeing today, it actually works. So that's today's history lesson of Bitcoin. Now let's head over to Satoshi Nakamoto and who he might be. And there's been many persons over the years that has been both proposed and claimed the name of Satoshi Nakamoto, and there has also been a lot of people trying to solve the riddle. But where do one start, you might wonder? Well, if we go back to the beginning where Satoshi was first heard of, we have the mailing lists. And ranging back to the beginning of 1990s, there were many mailing lists targeting different subjects. But this specific one, metstow.com, were run by a group to call themselves cypherpunks. And this is a term for an activist advocating for the widespread use of privacy-enhancing technology as a route to social and political change. And now you see why this was the perfect forum for Satoshi to publish his paper. And you can also see that it's probable that Satoshi, under a different name, were active in this mailing list before. The problem is that the mailing list is very large and mostly anonymous. But we know of some active people, which has also contributed to the underlying technologies of Bitcoin, or even come up with predecessors. Yes, as hard as it may be to hear, Bitcoin did not come up from nowhere, and it wasn't even the first one to merge cryptography with the new cash system. So first of all, we have David Chaum, and he was the person who came up with a lot of ideas that cypherpunks were built upon. And he wrote a paper in the middle of the 1980s from which he designed an anonymous electronic cash system which he called eCash. From this, he built the company DigiCash, which was implemented as a micropayment system in a few banks all over the world. The company, however, went bankrupt in 1998. And then we have something called Hashcash. It was developed in 1997 by Adam Back and isn't really a cash system as much as it is the first implementation of proof of work. And as you may have heard, this is something that Bitcoin uses in its core code. Well, actually, it wasn't really possible until this guy, Hal Finney, developed what he called reusable proof of work. And this is essentially what we can see in use today. Next up is something called B-Money, which was a paper written in 1998 by a computer scientist called Wei Dai. In his paper, he introduces a lot of ideas that is later on implemented into the Bitcoin paper. And Satoshi references both the Hashcash and the B-Money paper, and according to both Adam Back and Wei Dai, these are the first two persons that Satoshi contacted in developing his paper. Then we come to the work of Nick Szabo, or Szabo, I'm not sure how to pronounce it. In 1998, he designed a technology for decentralized digital currency that he called BitGold. The project has many similarities to Bitcoin and has been called a direct precursor to the Bitcoin architecture. In spring of 2008, he revived the idea on his blog unenumerated.blogspot.com, explaining a bit about it, and in the comments asking, quote, "Anybody wants to help me code one up?" unquote. During the following years, he mentions BitGold idea a few times on his blog, and also compares it to this new up-and-coming project called Bitcoin. So that's enough about the work that led up to Bitcoin. Let's get back to Satoshi. Because after the publication of a paper, he set out to implement it and get it running. In early January 2009, Satoshi mined the first block, called the Genesis block, and received a reward of 50 Bitcoin. Not long after, Hal Finney, as an early supporter, adopter, and contributor, received the first transaction of 10 Bitcoins. Now, Satoshi was very active within the community and the development, but only communicated through email and forum posts. No one ever met him or interacted with him in any other way. In 2010, he hinted to several people that he would take a step back, and in the summer, he handed over the GitHub admin access to Gavin Andresen, who had started working on the project earlier that year. The last time he is believed to have messaged anyone is in April 2011, when he said, "I've moved on to other things. It's in good hands with Gavin and everyone." Now, there's a lot of things that can be said about Satoshi's personality. Apparently, he was all business, no sweet talk whatsoever, and also he was a bit of sarcastic and quirky. You could simply say that he was a douche. But also, according to his fellow developers, he was a genius coder. The codebase is said to be extremely clear and well structured, almost so that it could not have been done by a single person. And I want to comment on this because whoever he or they is or was, and whatever Bitcoin is or may ever be, one cannot argue against the ingenuity of his actions, and I can just mention one of the things. In the first block, ever mined, there was a message that read, quote, "The Times, 3rd of January 2009, Chancellor on the brink of second bailout for banks," end quote. And this have two meanings. Firstly, it confirms that the block wasn't mined before this date. And secondly, it says so much about the motivation of Satoshi himself and why Bitcoin is needed so badly throughout the world. And I mean, if this doesn't get you going, then you have no heart. Okay, anyway, there has been a large amount of investigations, almost to a ridiculous extent, to find out who Satoshi is. On the website for the P2P Foundation, Satoshi had an account where he in the early days also published the paper. On this account, he is said to be a 37-year-old who lived in Japan. But there has been speculations that he isn't Japanese due to his perfect English and that the Bitcoin code isn't documented or labeled in Japanese. There's also been analysis of his spelling and usage of words like bloody hard, which has led to speculation that it was of Commonwealth origin, that is, the former British territories. Furthermore, there has been analysis made on the timestamps of his forum posts, which implies that he lived somewhere in the European time zones. Alright, 11 minutes into the video and I think we're ready to start some speculation. And as you can believe, there has been a lot of persons during the past 9 years that have both claimed to be and be suspected of being Satoshi Nakamoto, or at least a part of it. And first of all, we of course have the ones who contributed to the earlier works, such as Nick Szabo, Hal Finney, or Wei Dai. And Nick Szabo says in an interview that myself, Wei Dai, and Hal Finney were the only people I knew of who liked the idea enough to pursue it to any significant extent, until Nakamoto, assuming Nakamoto is not really Finney or Dai. These guys have denied all accusations, and both Hal Finney and Wei Dai have shown up their email history with Satoshi and have more or less been cleared of suspicion. But this is not really the case for Nick Szabo, and because of this, there are a lot of writers who have targeted him. However, even though there is a lot of circumstantial evidence, it's also generally accepted that there is no real proof. Taking a leap forward in time until March 2014, when a journalist discovered a man named Dorian Nakamoto, whose birth name is Satoshi Nakamoto, living in California. Beyond the name, Dorian was a graduated physicist who had worked as an engineer within the defense and the financial information section, which could suggest that he had the required experience and knowledge. He had also been laid off a couple of times, which could provide a grudge against the current financial system. As it turned out though, he wasn't the real Satoshi Nakamoto, but for Dorian it was too late. The media had turned his life upside down and even had been exposed to some property damage and so on. Luckily, a fundraising campaign raised over $23,000 in bitcoins intended to assist Dorian. Worth mentioning is that Hal Finney, the guy who received the first bitcoin transaction, actually just lives a couple of blocks away from Dorian Nakamoto. Make what you will of that. So the next big event in our story is in December 2015, when the magazine Wired and the website Gizmodo on the same day published articles who claimed the Australian academic Craig Stephen Wright to be the man behind Satoshi Nakamoto. Half a year later, in May 2016, Craig posted on his blog that he was the real Satoshi. The same day, both BBC News and The Economist published 2 articles where they seen cryptographic proof of this provided by Craig. The proof was that he had signed the message using the private key used in the first transactions of the Bitcoin blockchain. However, it did not take long before a few Bitcoin developers reasoned that Craig's so-called evidence actually didn't prove anything. Essentially, it could just have been a copy of an old signature made by Satoshi, and this could really have been done by anyone with enough cryptographic knowledge. On May 5th, Craig uploaded a blog post saying he was sorry and that the pressure had been too high. He did not say that he had lied, but only that he hadn't the courage nor the strength to pursue this endeavor. So, the ones that I have mentioned so far are, till this day, the major suspects of who can be Satoshi Nakamoto. However, there are a few honorable mentions, such as the Japanese mathematician called Shinichi Mochizuki, or a computer collective in the European financial sector, or perhaps even Elon Musk, who is said to have at least the financial knowledge to pull this off, as well as an incredible ability to learn quickly. But the more serious ones has, of course, been denied. Other rumors says that Satoshi is dead. Now, you could think of this as literal, but I want to think of it more in a metaphorical way. And I want to address this issue by going a bit further and asking, does it really matter who he is? And moreover, should we even try to find out? Because if we just take one step backwards and look at it from a sort of ideological point of view, we can see what stands in the center of it. And funny enough, in the center of it, I find the decentralization. So what does it mean? Well, a lot of things, of course, but perhaps the major ones are resistance to censorship and interoperability and so on. But in simple terms, I think it means that no one is in charge. Or perhaps no one should be in charge. And my personal view on this is that Satoshi had to die because of what he represents. If the real identity would be revealed, he would probably be regarded as one of the greatest minds of our time, as well as gaining a huge power of the whole cryptocurrency community. And this, in a quite big way, counteracts with the idea of decentralization. So I hope that this is why Satoshi kept his identity secret, or if you may, why he had to die. And this is also why I think that we shouldn't be looking for him at all, because it would bring no good beyond satisfying our own curiosity. So if you allow me to be a little bit cheesy and poetic right now, the fact that he is unknown brings a sort of magic to the brave new world we are entering right now. And I would even go so far to say that the disconnection between the name Satoshi Nakamoto and the man with his inherent fragility is one of the most brilliant things that the cryptocurrency community has seen to this day. So instead of helplessly looking for who he is, perhaps we should lay our focus on finding and fulfilling Satoshi's original vision. And finally, I actually want to play the end scene of the movie V for Vendetta. Now, apart from it being an awesome movie, I don't want to show this because of the anarchistic mood, but in just this scene, I can see some similarities between the character V and Satoshi Nakamoto. So I'm really looking forward to reading your comments and hear if you can see what I see.
Tell me, do you like music, Mr. Finch?
That music.
Yes, his music.
Who was he?
He was Edmund Dantes. And he was my father. And my mother. My brother. My friend. He was you. And me. He was all of us.